I know it. I speak on behalf of all my colleagues and with the admiration we have for the FBI and the good work that you do. But as Chairman Rogers said, and I deeply appreciate your recognition that we have to all be good stewards of these very precious and scarce hard-earned tax dollars. And I particularly like your approach that you have laid out, that you've asked all your employees to think of the every asset, every resource, everything that you work with at the FBI is borrowed from someone who they care deeply about. That's a great way to think about it. We have in this subcommittee in past years and in the fiscal year 16 bill worked hard to protect the supply chain. Has been a real source of concern. My predecessor Frank Wolf quite correctly identified this as early on. I think Frank was one of the very first out of the gate to recognize the threat posed to this country by cyber espionage, cyber theft, particularly from China. And the supply chain is one particular source of concern and vulnerability. So I wrote into the 16 bill in consultation with the good people in your office to give the FBI an enhanced role in reviewing the supply chain for telecommunications equipment, for computer equipment acquired by agencies under the jurisdiction of the Commerce, Justice, Science Subcommittee. Could you describe, Director, the threat that all agencies in the federal government face from foreign governments and other bad actors to their information technology systems?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your support of that effort. The FBI has taken your urging and marched out and executed on it. After the language in last year's bill, we have promulgated already to every federal agency a primer on here are the best practices to think about supply chain, because we're only as strong as our weakest link. So you can spend all the time in the world making sure that foreign states aren't penetrating the top corporation in the chain, but if they get in down below, they're going to wreak just as much havoc. And so we have tried to train the rest of the federal procurement world on how to think about that. And then we have stood up something called the Hybrid Threat Center, which I just talked to the House Intelligence Committee about this morning, where we've brought together a lot of elements of the intelligence community and other parts of the U.S. government to literally sit together and think about the threat posed to the United States by corporations who are allowing themselves to be co-opted and act as agents of foreign powers, and the work of foreign powers try and penetrate that supply chain, maybe at a lower level, and work their way up. It's an enormous undertaking. I'm not here to report that we have licked it, but thanks to your support, I think we made a good down payment on that effort.
The approach that we took, Mr. Chairman, is in order not to overwhelm these good men and women, was asked the FBI to come up with sort of a good housekeeping seal of approval from the FBI, best practices, as the Director just said. And the best practices which you just published, and I thank you very much for that, the agencies under the jurisdiction of CJS are compelled to follow the FBI's best practices to protect the integrity of their supply chain, because we know of the threat posed by, there are a lot of countries, but China is the worst offender in building in hardwiring, Trojan horses or back doors into computer chips. And I think Australia has just forbid, they will not allow any government entity to buy routers or telecommunications equipment manufactured by Huawei. They just flat won't buy them because of the pervasive threat posed by the Chinese and using that Chinese-built equipment to penetrate the government. How